Hi everybody, so today we're going to be making the app that's on screen right now, and it's a simple app that just requests data from the Star Wars API and displays it on screen. We're going to be doing this using Swift and Combine, and hopefully through this you'll see just how powerful Combine is when it comes to performing network requests, and you'll see how in future you could use it to perform more complicated requests. So let's just get started by creating a new app, and then we can call it something like network test. The team doesn't matter, the organisation identifier doesn't matter, just make sure for interface you select SwiftUI and the language is Swift. We don't need to include tests and we don't need any storage either, so we just hit next, and then we don't need a Git repo, so we can just hit create. Brilliant. Right, so let's just get started by importing Combine at the top of the file. And then first thing we want to do is just define our response model. So we can call it character and set that to decodable. And this is the type of data that we're expecting to receive from the service. So we're just going to define some properties here that we expect to get back. So we expect to get a name back and the height back as well. So decodable just means that an object can be decoded from data. So when we receive our response, we're basically just going to tell it to decode it to this type. And then by setting these properties as optional, we're telling Swift that if you're unable to parse either of them, don't throw a decoding error. So let's go down and then create our view model. So class view model, and that's going to be an observable object because we're going to want to observe it from our view up here. So this object basically will be responsible for performing the network calls. So in here we can just have a publish property, publish var, and call it character, and we can just set that equal to character, and we'll just set the name and height to null and null, and we want this to be published because we want it to be read from our view. So we can just go up here and create a state object for our view model, like that. And then let's just create like a really super basic UI. So in here we'll just create two text objects like that, and just set it equal to view model dot character dot name, and the default value will just be a dash, and paste that down below, and we'll do one for the height as well. So it should just display the name and then the height after we get that back from the service. Right, so when it's finished running, you'll see that we just get two dashes here as expected because the name and the height are both null. So let's just go back into the view model and create a new method called get character, like that. And then inside the view, if we call .on appear, and then here we can call view model dot get character. So when the view appears, I'll execute the service call in the view model, which should hopefully then update the UI after we get the response back. And then just for now as well, just to kind of keep things clean, we can create a new file, a Swift file, and we'll just call it view model, and then hit create. And then we can just jump back into the content view and then copy both the view model and the character into this new view model file. And then let's just import Combine at the top as well, and that just helps make things clean. You could just put it all in one file, but obviously as we add more code it gets less and less readable. Cool, so up at the top as well, if we just create an enum and call it network error, and then just stick one case in here called unknown. This will be needed for our publisher. We're not actually going to do any error handling, just to keep the tutorial simple, but just know that you could like add different cases here for different error types and handle them separately if you wanted to. And then we're just going to jump down here and create a new func and call it perform request, like that, and that's going to return any publisher, and the success case is going to be character, and the failure case is going to be network error. So just to give you a quick overview of the flow here, perform request is going to be the method where we actually define the request that we're going to send to the service. It's also going to be the method where we call the URL session methods from. Get character is then going to call perform request and subscribe to its publisher. Then when the publisher gets updated, it's then going to update this published character property here, which should then in turn update the view. Right, so at the top, let's just import foundation, and that will give us access to URL request and URL session and all that kind of stuff. So inside perform request, let's just start creating more requests. So let request, and that will be of type URL request, and that takes in a URL object, which we can just create up here. So let URL equals URL, and we'll use the string initializer like that. Just paste the URL in there, and then we just need to force unwrap that with a bang as well. So that URL string, I can just put that down in the description just to save you typing it out. And then inside here, we just put our URL like that. And this request, this is how you would define like your headers and other request parameters, but for our case we don't really need any of that. But one thing that we do need to define is the HTTP method, and that would just be get, like that. And we just need to go up here actually and change that to a var. To execute the request, we can then just simply go down and we'll say return, because this is to return the publisher. Return URL session dot shared dot data task publisher, and then simply just put in the request that we've created up above in there. This will throw an error for just now because it's expecting that this method returns any publisher with character and network error, but this will just return a data task publisher. So we'll need to transform whatever response we get down below so that it returns the expected type. So all this method will do is simply return a publisher, and that publisher will emit an event once we get a response back from the service. And it's worth noting as well that even if we call this method, if there's no subscribers to this publisher, it won't bother actually even executing the request. So it needs at least one subscriber. So there's a couple of things we want to actually do to the data after we receive it before we send it out to the subscribers. So the first thing we can do is call .map, and then we just put a / and then .data. So Combine provides a version of the map operator that allows us to destructure a tuple and access just the attribute that we need, which in this case is the data attribute. And then the next stage would be calling the .decode method. The type is our character that we created earlier on, so character.self, and the decoder, we can just use the standard JSON decoder. Since mapping data is such a common task, Combine provides us with a dedicated operator to make this easier. So that's this decode operator here. And then we can just call map error down here, and then the error that we receive, and we'll just return type network error and then down here we can just return network error dot unknown. So map error basically in a real world app would allow you to handle specific errors, so things like decoding errors, general API errors, things like that. But obviously, like I said earlier on, in our case we don't actually need that just now. And then the next thing we want to do is just say receive on run loop dot main, and this is just so that we receive the response on the main thread. If we don't have this and we try to update the UI with the response, Xcode will throw an error, so you'll know if you've made this mistake. It will say publishing changes from the background thread isn't allowed. And then next thing we can do is just call the erase to any publisher method. So this method is a type eraser. For our case, we can just think of it as simplifying the return type. So it just allows us to return any publisher. We don't need to go into that in too much detail. Right, so this is excellent. We're making fantastic progress. The perform request method's complete. So all we need to do now is just call that from get character and subscribe to it. So we can start off by creating a property like response and set that equal to any publisher, success is character, and failure is a network error, like that. And then set that equal to perform request. And then to subscribe, let's just go down and we'll call the sync method. We don't actually need to use this receive completion. For now, we can just stick to using the receive value. And then we receive the response that we got in here. And so since we've already decoded this as type character, we can set self.character equal to response, because response will be of type character. So you can think of this sync method as us just subscribing to this publisher, and if you just remember the quote, the stream goes down the sync, this data stream here, we're calling all these methods to transform the data stream, so we're decoding it, mapping errors, running in the main loop, etc, etc. But then at the end of the stream we call sync, and this is where we receive our final value or our completion. So you might notice now that we're receiving this warning from Xcode telling us that the result of call sync is unused. So the sync method actually returns a cancelable, and when that cancelable is destroyed, it terminates the subscription immediately. So in our case here, we're never actually storing the cancelable, so it will be destroyed immediately, and so the subscription will be terminated immediately, and therefore this closure won't be executed and the UI won't be updated. And so all we need to do to fix that is just go up here and create a new variable and call it cancelable, and set it equal to a set of type any cancelable. We can just set it to an empty set just like that, and then just go down here and call store, and then we can just store the cancelable in here. Right, so if we just hit run now, we should see that we get data back from the service, and you can see as expected we're getting the name and the height displayed here. And just to show you what happens as well if we don't have this cancelable, so just stick a breakpoint within the closure and comment out the cancelable, and you'll see that this breakpoint never actually gets executed. Yeah, so nothing's happened, the breakpoint's never been executed because the subscription's been terminated immediately.